Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Eduardo Harari, and this is NLL Talk on Cinco TV's channel 249 and 250 here on the Spanglish World Networks and Spanglish Sports World Network. With us today, we have the great pleasure of having Mr. Bob Hamley of the Panthers City Lacrosse Club, as well as you can see in the picture from that below me, Mr. Gary Groob. Remember as well to please to go to the stores of iOS and Android to download the application of Cinco TV, where you can watch all our programming, and you can leave us a comment and a rating because we always like to learn how we are doing in our programming for you and how are you enjoying the shows that we are putting on. Remember as well that Cinco TV can be found across Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Well, it's my time to go and hand it over to our great MC, Mr. Gary Groob. And Gary, it's all yours.
Thanks very much, Eduardo. It's a pleasure. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us.
Oh, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
All right, just a little overview on Bob's career. He's a 20-year veteran of the National Lacrosse League, serves as general manager and vice president of lacrosse operations for Panther City Lacrosse. He joined the club in September of 2020, played in the NLL for 4 years. Well, back, I guess, would be the MILL back then.
That's right.
For the Buffalo Bandits, won two championships and some absolutely loaded teams. We'll get into that a little bit later. Following his career, he enjoyed a successful run as head coach or general manager for 16 years throughout the league. Pretty impressive, Bob. Now, the first question that we ask everybody when they get on the show is, how did you get into lacrosse? What was the first moments that got you?
Yeah, no, interesting story. I was born in Owen Sound, Ontario in 1965. And so obviously a hotbed for lacrosse back in those days, and still is. My dad was a baseball player, Gary, and never played lacrosse. My mom's brothers played, and my mom actually was reading the paper one day and mentioned to my dad that lacrosse registration was happening. And, thankfully, my mom and dad signed me up for lacrosse. And as they say, the rest is history. Started playing when I was 4 years old in the old Owen Sound Arena, which is now, I think, a grocery store.
The times they are changing.
Yeah, that's for sure. Sure is fond memories, though, for sure. But I got to thank my mom. And obviously my dad said, no, we'll sign him up for lacrosse. No, he's not going to play baseball. So I'm very happy about that.
Well, your dad also played hockey, didn't he? He was quite a hockey player at Owen Sound.
He was a very accomplished hockey player. Yes, he was. He played, senior A hockey for the old Collingwood Shipbuilders back in the day, and that was almost like playing for the Rochester Americans back in the day. A lot of pros and semi-pro players played in those leagues. He, unfortunately for Dad, he dislocated his hip 1 year, and that was kind of it for him. He played a little more after that, but some say he would have played pro hockey at the highest level if it wasn't for the hip. So, but anyway, we're still very proud of him. He was a great athlete in his time.
And you followed along. You played hockey as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did play hockey. I played a lot of it. Unfortunately, in Canada, you get to a certain age and you're either going to make it or you're not. But I managed to finally make my AAA team in Guelph. We moved to Guelph in '77. My dad was in management with the Cooperators, so we moved to Guelph, where the head office was. So I finally made our AAA team in what was that, 81, I believe. Yes, 81. We went to Czechoslovakia. We were Ontario finalists. Wow. Some pros from that team. Paul Bridges went on to have a good career with Rochester, and a couple other guys had some pro careers. We had a pretty good team. But and then I played some junior B for Mr. Holiday in Guelph, Joe Holiday. Wow. Holiday Platers. And then, once I got to that age, I had a real love for lacrosse throughout all those years. But and still loved hockey, but started focusing more on lacrosse.
Right. Where'd you play your junior? Where'd you play your junior lacrosse?
Junior lacrosse, mixed bag. We're going to celebrate our 40th anniversary. We're actually getting together, hopefully, in Owen Sound in August. We won the Founders Cup in 1982.
Nice.
Dave Cruikshank, Steve Baker, Mark Stevens, Jeff Tate. The list goes on. Butch McNabb, a lot of great players on that team. So August of 82, we won the Founders Cup out in Port Coquitlam. 83, I was drafted by the Oshawa Green Gales, the last year of junior A lacrosse in Oshawa. For Neil Armstrong, Bob Dignan. Played with some good players there as well. Glenn Lay played on that team. We eventually hooked up again in Buffalo. And then 84, 85, went back to Owen Sound. And then 86, I finished in Kitchener. We ended up losing to Point Edward in the second round of the playoffs. I think Point Edward went on to lose to Scarborough in the Founders Cup that year in 86. So kind of bounced around with my junior career.
It's quite an impressive career. An awful lot of really, really big names you played with as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And they played with Bob Hamley, so they played with a pretty big name too.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Now, we move into your career with major indoor lacrosse.
Yes.
And 92 is when you started in with Buffalo, right? So just their heyday, and more or less that it just changed over from Eagle to Mill. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just a couple of years prior to that, and we were a new franchise in Buffalo, the Bandits. John Meridian in Buffalo, and the Knox family was given the franchise in Buffalo, and played out of the old auditorium. And as you mentioned earlier, it was a pretty stacked team. We started that year 0-3. We started off at home to New York and lost, and we went into New York and lost in overtime, I believe, and then we went in and played against the Gates in Detroit, our third game. Or actually, I think they came to us. And they whipped us pretty good. It was a bunch of box players trying to figure out the new rules in the United States, because it was a lot different. You could hit, like today, you can hit within 3 feet of the ground ball, which was foreign to us. Canadian lacrosse back then, you couldn't do that. But we took it on the chin for the first 3 games, and then we figured it out. And I'd have to really pull back my memory here to how many games in a row after that. But it was the rest of that season, which was only an 8-game season. So we went 5-3, and then funny story, they changed the playoffs just for basically for Buffalo, because we were selling out by the end of the year, Gary. So it was supposed to be the top team from each division. They changed the rules to the top 3 in each division. So we got the benefit. We got the benefit of that. We played Boston, and then we went in and beat the Gates in Detroit, and then we went into Philly and won the championship. And then the following year, we won 8 in a row again throughout the season, and 3 more playoff games, and then we won, 5 or 6 after that. So it was quite a run, but a who's who of guys I feel privileged to play with on those teams. Just a phenomenal group.
No, I loved it. I loved going to the odd. Just something I just happened to pull out was I have one of those old things, and we have you in there.
Yeah, there you go, number 28.
Yeah, oh yeah. But one of my I love going to the odd. Just the electricity in that building. It was an old barn, but just you're on top of it. It was like the Spectrum in Philadelphia. You were on top of the players, and the electricity of having 16,000, 17,000 people was just absolutely insane. And the games that you guys gave us, because we had a number of guys from those years been on the show. We've had Darius, we've had Dallas Eliak, we've had Jeff Clausen was on a few weeks ago, and everybody was talking about it being more or less the wild, wild west of lacrosse, and kind of figuring out how the rules should go. And something that would basically get you a 4-game suspension nowadays was loss of possession.
It sure was. It was a man's game for sure. Back to the odd, 16,325 people. That's what they announced. I think there's probably closer to 17, but by the time you got standing room in, but the old barn was just rocking. It was like nothing like anything else. And I think we sold out something like 16 games in a row. The city really took to it. And, I've said it for years, Gary, I wish every lacrosse player that played at at any level could experience that as a player. I think we saw a little bit of it this year in Buffalo with Colorado. That was just phenomenal. The crowds for that as well.
Yeah.
So Buffalo has really become, over the years, a real lacrosse city and one of our cornerstones in the National Lacrosse League now, for sure.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I want to talk about some of the guys that you played under. You played under Les Bartley, Johnny Meridian. You mentioned Buff McCready.
Yeah.
Just the knowledge that would come across. What was it like to be in a room where Les was commanding the team? Because he really wasn't one that would be screaming around, but he commanded respect from everybody.
No, Buff did a good job. We were still trying to find our way the first 3 games. So Buff McCready's a legend. Anything you talk about Buff McCready, no one's ever said a bad thing about Buff.
Mm-hmm.
But to John Meridian's credit and to Buff's credit, Les jumped on board, and to Les's credit, he was not a guy that probably played at a high level, loved the game just like you and me, Gary, but he worked so hard to become a great coach. But the one thing he had was his communication skill and his leadership skill and his able to talk to you about the game, about strategy. How are you feeling? Where can I put you to have success? And he worked hard and tirelessly. He became a video nut. He's the first one to, in 92, 93, we were watching film of other teams.
Right.
And he just became such a great coach, and he worked so hard at it that you could not help but respect Les. And that's one thing I've learned from him is just that communication, being able to get with the players and try and get to put them in position to be successful. And the one thing he had in Buffalo was a lot of great players. And we all know, Gary, in any game you play, you can put a bunch of great players together. It doesn't mean they're going to be a great team. Right. Les just fortified that for us. He put Derek Keenan in the right places. He put John Tavares in the right places, Bob Hamley in the right places, that we were successful. And so, all the accolades that Les gets now, and God rest his soul, he deserves, because he really worked so hard at it and made all of us come together.
And we were really lucky over here and being in Toronto is that I was able to watch him in Buffalo mold a team there. And then again here, with the Ontario Raiders first, but then here with the Toronto Rock, and watch him mold that dynasty of the early 2000s. We had Jim Veltman on the show also a ways back, and he mirrored exactly what you just said about the communication skills. He also brought up the video and things like that were just it was unheard of. Like the only other person who really was doing it, I think, was Roger Nielsen in hockey, and everybody else was kind of that's not the way we did it. And so a couple of steps forward to bring it, and look where it's come now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wondered, now I look back upon it, he had a young family. He was the leader of the union for General Motors in St. Catharines. I wondered if he slept, where he found all the time to do all these things. But he did a wonderful job, and I was thrilled to be, one of the guys that kind of carried on and did some coaching in the league, and here I am GMing in the league. It's we're very fortunate to have Les in our game, for sure.
Yeah, I can only imagine if cancer hadn't taken him so young, really what he could have accomplished over the next 20 years that we were talking about it. Because you look at such a young life, and what he accomplished is amazing. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right, Gary. And people talk about it all the time, the coaching tree that has fallen under Les. And that's the other thing he did too was, the assistant coaches. He challenged them. I know Ed Camo is a really good friend of mine. Eddie worked for him. Derek worked for him. Jammer in Toronto, and I knew Eddie was going to become a good coach one day, but he learned from Les too, and just made him that much better. And so Paul Day, Troy Cordingley, myself, Derek Keenan, the list goes on and on. It
really is amazing, isn't it?
It is really amazing. It is really amazing. Absolutely.
Right. Now, not to sell yourself short, because, in the 4 years that you played, 44 goals, 61 assists in 31 games, that's pretty good numbers. Especially for the league, because that was some crazy, crazy play.
Yeah, no, and in 92, 93, I wasn't the oldest guy. I wasn't the youngest guy. I was kind of maybe in my heyday a little bit, or maybe just past. But I can tell you, Gary, you're playing with John Tavares. I was on the top of the power play, so I look to my left, and there's Darius Kilgore waiting for a pass. I look to my right, there's Derek Keenan waiting for a pass. I look down the crease, and there's John Tavares waiting for a pass. On the other side, it was either Kevin Alexander or Rich Kilgore. So I benefited. Let's be honest. I could play, but there was some guys around me that were just outstanding, and I just tried to do the best I could. It was a lot of fun. It really turned into a team. It really turned into a team, and a lot of talent, but we really came together as a team. Credit to Les and Johnny and really the guys that were in the dressing room. We could have been worried about our points or what have you, but we were all competitors. We wanted to win so bad that it really was fun to be a part of.
Having all the Kilgore brothers there too, you could walk easy along the floor too, because you knew there was someone there to cover you.
Darius was the best, and he was a young guy who full of piss and vinegar. You had to talk to him, and that was another good thing. You had Keenan, you had Veltman, myself, Brian Hall, guys that have been around the block, have won, understood. Darius was a winner. He always will be a winner, and you had to pull in the reins a little bit. And the credit to Darius, he listened to us, and I think he learned a lot from all of us.
He was probably one of my favorite shows too, because Darius is such a character, and he has so much to tell. And you're talking about coaches. Well, there was your player's coach. Yeah. So much so that they all wore a mohawk. So off he went to the dressing room, and 10 minutes later he was out with a mohawk. He was one of the boys, regardless if he was in coaching, playing, general manager, shouldn't make a difference. So.
Yeah, no, and a real student, Gary, of the game. If you look at the defenses in the National Lacrosse League now, a lot of that started with Darius. And, they're maybe a little bit not modified, but that's really Darius's defense. A lot of teams play now. He started that, and a lot of good lacrosse minds have modified it here and there. But he was a real student of the game, and I was proud to be his teammate. I played a lot of games against him in the summer too, Gary, and it wasn't fun playing against him. I'll tell you that much. Tough guy.
Yeah, that's the MSL years.
MSL years. He was in my last year of real serious lacrosse. He was in Niagara. They went to the Man Cup. They beat us in 7 games. And the 7th game in Niagara, my mission was to try and get Darius. He got a couple early penalties, and back in those days, if you took, I believe it was 5 penalties, you were kicked out of the game. So once he got 2 penalties, 4 minutes, I made it my mission to see if I could, get him to the 5th penalty. I think I got him to 4, and I got a black eye out of it too. The black eye, I remember it vividly. Bobby Watson was the goaltender for Niagara, and I went right after Darius to see if I could engage in some kind of fight. I knew I'd lose, but at least maybe we could get Darius not hurting us on the score sheet. And I remember Bobby Watson grabbing Darius. Darius, no, you can't do that. And he stayed in the game. They ended up beating us, but he was a real competitor, real tough guy to play against. And he was our kind of a modern time Gordie Howe.
Right.
He'd have a goal, assist, in a fight. And most nights it was 3 goals, 3 assists in a fight. So he was a beauty.
Yeah, most definitely. Bill Fox, I got another one we had on the show. He had a lot to say. I'm lucky enough that I have probably one of the best mill collections around, because Bill actually gave me his collection.
Oh, is that right?
A number of them are in VHS form, and I still have to get transferred. But yeah, so all those games from way back, anything that Bill refed, I'm pretty sure I have a tape of it. And I have a lot of the DVDs of the early NLL things. So yeah, it's a pretty gold collection now, I'd say.
That is. That's I envy you. That's fantastic.
Now let's get into you. You stopped playing 94, 95.
Yeah.
Why so soon? Didn't you have a couple more years in you, really? Or is it just?
No, I hurt my knee the summer of 94, I want to say, before Brampton. I hurt my knee. I was a little misdiagnosed and took a little while to get fixed up. And I don't think I ever was the same, Gary. I think people would tell you that. And I played the year 94 in Buffalo, and I maybe again wasn't the same. And then I went to training camp the following year, and I thought it was much better shape. The knee was much stronger, but Les had brought in. I think Ted Dowling was in that year, Neil Doddridge, a few lefties. As GMs, it's hard. You're always trying to stay ahead of the curve. I think Les made that decision pretty early on. I went to training camp, and Les had to cut me, had to let me go. Tried to catch on with somebody else, but the rules were a little different back then. They didn't have a release form or what have you. So I just packed it in and played a couple more summers, and that was it. But credit to Les, they ended up winning that year. I think 96 or whatever year that was, 95, 96. So obviously he knew what he was doing. But I was pretty upset at the time because lacrosse is my love, and really disappointed. But at the end of the day, you have to understand.
Sure. Now you get involved in coaching. How did that come about?
Well, I think it's just a natural transition. I always knew I wanted to stay in the game, and I early in the '90s, Chuck Miller and myself started the Guelph Regals Junior B team because I was living in Guelph. We started that. I was the coach the first couple of years, and then walked away from that. But it just became a natural transition. I believe not long after that, did some minor stuff, and then Junior A in Kitchener is really kind of where I got my start. And a couple tough years there, but we made the playoffs my last year with Aaron Wilson and a few of those kids that went on to do some things. Obviously, Aaron was the most prominent guy on that team, and then my good old friend Bob McMahon, who I played for in Brampton, got the head coaching job in Albany in 2001, and he brought me on as an assistant, so it kind of developed from there. But I always knew I was going to stay involved in the game somehow, and coaching is one way to do it.
Right. Well, we're talking about the Albany team now.
Yeah.
So you're an assistant under Bob, and you bring an offense that was the worst in the league to a championship game.
Right.
Well, obviously you were paying attention to Les and all the rest of those guys.
Yeah.
How do you reinvent an offense that really is floundering to bring it to that kind of prominence?
Well, I think again, timing and personnel. Josh Sanderson was just ready to break out. Bob Hamley got the advantage of getting to coach him when he is starting to take off. Josh had a wonderful year, and then you throw in Gary Rosiski, Jamie Grimbleby on the left side, and then on the right side you got Dan Teat. We brought in Nick Trudeau. Mike Reagan was a superstar, U.S. superstar. It wasn't, I don't think, just me coming in. Obviously, I had some fresh ideas, fresh off playing not too long, and junior coaching, had some ideas. Bob McMahon, fabulous mentor. Eddie Como helped me. I know I met with Ed Como when I first got the job at Tim Hortons on Clapperson's Corners, and he was good enough to draw some X's and O's for me, and just give me a little highlights of what he's done, and so very thankful. But that was a young group that was just blossoming, and Josh, I only use Josh as an example. There was Cam Woods at the defensive end, Jimmy Moss. Those are young guys that were just starting to figure it out, and these stars that a lot of people knew they were going to be, and it was just a great collaboration, and just an incredible year. 14-2. The only two losses we had was to Sean Williams and Kurt Malowski and John Grant Jr. in Rochester, and then we ended up nipping them in the playoffs to get to Toronto. But yeah, just a great young group. I'd like to go back and see what the average age of that group was that year. It was pretty young.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, because I knew Cam later on in his career, obviously, but when he was starting out, he was really a juggernaut player, because captain of the team, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yeah. Yes, he was. Yeah. And Flip Sanderson was on that team. Ryan Sanderson was on that team. Rob Blaisdell had a hell of a year. I think he was goalie of the year that year.
Right, sure.
Just everything came together. And Bob McMahon's just a terrific coach.
Yeah, I've had a number of meetings with Bob. He was doing the Oakville Titans.
Yes,
In,
right.
Senior B, and
Yeah.
just the way he goes about things is not your normal run-of-the-mill coach.
No.
He is full of fervor, we can say.
Yes,
But
yes.
he's funny at the same time, so he's never going to really berate anybody. But
What's the
not,
point across?
not out in public, anyway. he will get his point across. Is really a good way to say it. Yeah.
Well, Bob's just great because I think we all would love to work for people that just hire you and let you do your job. That's what Bob did.
Mm-hmm.
When things were maybe going south or weren't going the way it was supposed to, he'd insert himself. But he really let his people do the work, and under his guidelines and under his rules, and he's had a lot of success with it. But it was great to see him win a championship in Calgary a couple of years ago. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. And that trophy made it over with the Oakville Titans to come out to the Rock facility for some of the games. So yeah. It was nice to see the trophy again too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's going to be probably a theme that we keep coming back to with all of you guys is the patience to develop younger players. Right. Bob has it. You have it. When we get into your coaching staff, we'll discuss about that as well. But it all seems it came back to, again, it's a Les Bartley trait of having the patience to watch someone make the mistakes, learn from them, and develop.
Yeah, absolutely. Lacrosse players, I've always said it. None of us, when I got cut in 94, 95 by Les, I'd never been cut with lacrosse.
Right.
So lacrosse players really, they go through their minor and their junior and it's basically show up and you play, but it's become such a skilled game now, Gary, right? Offense, defense, that you really, for a team to be successful, you have to have some growing pains, and that's one thing I learned from Bob. One thing I learned from Les is patience, understanding, how do I get that person to be successful? Where do I have to put them to be successful? And, Albany, for example, Josh, which is so good with the ball. And then you add in a Dan Teed on the other side, who's so good off ball. It's a coach's dream, right? And there were some nights, it was tough with the young guys, but patience, communication, the player understanding that you got their back, that's very important. You don't want to go into something knowing, okay, well, if I make a mistake, then I'm done. And that wasn't the case on our teams. It was very important. The player knew, hey, we know we're going to make mistakes. Coaches are going to make mistakes. We're going to call timeouts at the wrong time, call the wrong play against the wrong defense, whatever. Patience and communication was something that, we feel like it's very important.
Right. Sure. So you move over to Columbus in 2002 as a head coach.
Right.
And after 1 year, you're moving to Arizona. So you have a chance to well, it's not an expansion team, but new ground, new environment, trying to figure it out. Let's talk about the Columbus year before that. I had heard a story about a lot of bus riding.
Well, it's a true story. We used to meet at the old carpool in Burlington there, just before the Skyway, hop on a bus and drive 8 hours to Columbus. And that year, Albany was in our division. Ottawa was in our division. Montreal. So I know Montreal wasn't in that year, but so a lot of bus rides. And I actually credit it to our success. We finished 8-8 that year. We actually upset Albany in Albany that year, and we beat Calgary at home. And then I think we beat everybody else that we were supposed to. But I credit the bus, Gary. You couldn't help but like your teammates after 8 hours down the game and 8 hours back. We actually had a world famous trip. We left on a Thursday night from the carpool. Played Ottawa on the Friday night, and then we had to bus all the way to Jersey for a Sunday afternoon game. And our owner at the time lived in New York. He couldn't even make it over to Jersey to give us per diem. We were on a sleeper bus. The stories from that, you could write a whole book just on the stories from that trip. We had a great leadership group. Derek Suddens, Peter Locke, Pat Madalena, John Harrison was on that team.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had quite a leadership group that, really they could have said, screw this, we're out, but they rallied the guys, really responded to the coaches. I'm very thankful for a lot of them. A lot of them obviously went to Arizona. A few of them didn't. That's a whole other story because a guy like Derek Suddens didn't get paid his full salary. So under the rules, if he didn't get paid, he became a free agent. So we lost some key guys. But Columbus, I mean, it made me a better coach, Gary. It really did. It made me a better person probably because those guys, they battled and they had to put up with a lot of crap, including their owner not coming to see them, 20 miles away.
It's easier to go to war when everybody is on the same page. And
yeah, no, absolutely. And Peter Locke was our captain. Peter didn't want to come. I had a lot of convincing, talked to his dad. His dad, Doc Locke out in Burnaby, is famous for those junior teams that he and Paul Damonte put together. And I had to do a lot of convincing, but to Peter's credit, he stuck it out and stuck it out in Arizona with me as well.
Wow. So we moved to Arizona.
Yes.
And let's talk about that. So now this is you guys were the first tenants in the arena.
We were the first game, Gary. December 26th, so Boxing Day, as we call it in Canada, 2003. They wanted to use that as a test run before the Coyotes played the next night in their first game in the Glendale Arena. So we played Vancouver, and we won our first game. But beautiful arena at the time. And, the Coyotes took us over. That's probably another 2-hour show on that one. But the ownership switched over to the Coyotes, and we were the first game in that arena. And we managed to beat Vancouver, who was pretty darn good in their own right. So,
and a few famous people around there, who's back in the league again. Gretzky was with Arizona at that time, so he was able to make a few little trips in.
Yeah, some great Wayne Gretzky stories. We had him there for that first game, and we had a shoot around in the morning, and so I kind of surprised everybody that. Hey, everybody get in their stalls, sit down. I got a guest coming. And sure enough, Wayne Gretzky, who everything you hear about him is so true. He's just such a gentleman, such an ambassador for Canada, for lacrosse, for hockey, just a wonderful human being. He walked around, Gary, to every guy and every coach and every trainer, shook their hand, looked them in the eye, and, said hello. And so the last two guys were, who was it? It was Mike Miron and Phil Weatherup. Last two guys. And he got to them. He says, "You're the goalies, eh?" "Yeah." He says, "You're effing crazy." Shook their hands and gave a little, pep talk. And, the guys were just in awe of Wayne. We all were. Yeah, we all were. Yeah.
It's great to have It's great to have him back in the league now too. So I'm sure there'll be more stories around from city to city too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's fabulous. Great to have him back. He loves the game. I tell one more story. So I moved the family down full time in 2004. And we just moved down 2 days, and my boss calls me. He says, "Hey, you're going to be at this meeting tonight at 5:00 in Scottsdale." And I said, "Oh, I didn't know about it." "No, you got to be there." I said, "Okay, honey, keep unpacking here. I'll be back in a bit." So went over to the meeting, and, I'm sitting like I'm facing you, Gary, and we're in a boardroom, and it's Cliff Fletcher and Mike Barnett, who were GM and advisor, and a few others, and my boss. So we go around the room, and we start the meeting, and all of a sudden, 5 minutes in, door opens, and I kind of look, and it's Wayne. He's coming in, and he's going to sit right across from me. So now, they haven't got to me yet, so I got to give the lacrosse update. So I give the lacrosse update. And a few guys over in the room across from me are kind of laughing. Maybe I talk funny. I don't know. So anyway, the meeting ends, and the CFO starts laughing. And he comes over to me, and I said, "What are you laughing at? Like, I got something on my shirt or what?" He says, "You should have seen your face when Wayne walked in."
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was. It was like, oh boy, such an awesome guy. But yeah, I tell that one all the time.
Now you hire Bob McMahon as your assistant now.
Right. Yeah.
Full circle.
Absolutely. That was the year Albany was sold to San Jose, and Bob. I think they wanted Bob back. I'm not sure. I don't remember, Gary, exactly what the story was there.
Mm-hmm.
But Bob, said to me, he says, "I'm not going back to I'm not flying to San Jose. I don't want to do that."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, I think I'm close to getting the Arizona job. Let me get this solidified." And when I did, I phoned Bob right away. There wasn't anyone better to be in that role. And again, the rest is history. But Bob's just such a fantastic person, a mentor to me. Mm-hmm. This was my second year of being a head coach, and now I was the GM too, which I hadn't done. So to have him, as you know, Gary, Bob will tell you what he thinks when you ask him. And what do you think of so and so? He's not good enough. Let's do this, do that. So it was an easy decision, and we had a lot of success. Credit a lot of it to him, and Rick Wilson was my other assistant from Fergus, who I played with the Thistles back in the day, and he was a great guy for me as well. Kept me grounded. You could talk to those guys about anything, and as you can go through a whole season. It's never perfect every game. There's always some things you got to work on. So those guys were great.
Right. And you make it to the championship game again, and a few accolades for yourself. You're coach and GM of the year.
Yeah. Well, again,
only a few to do that. Win them both.
Yeah. Well, I worked hard at it. I do work hard at it because I love it. But again, another perfect storm. That was the year that Dan Dawson comes of age, right? I'll never forget. Dan's always given every other person credit for his success, and we all were a part of his success. He was the guy that worked so hard to become such a great player and great ambassador. But I remember, Gary, when I got the job, and it was a CBA year, and we didn't get the CBA done until our first game was December 26th. I want to say we didn't get the CBA done until like December 14th. And so I had to phone guys and say, "Okay, here's your contract." And a lot of guys said, "Oh, I played for this last year," and I said, "I haven't got time. I got to get airline tickets." And Dan was one of them. He had a good year in Columbus, and I said, "Well, this is what I got, Dan. If you want to play, you got to play." And I don't think Dan was real happy. There's a lot of guys that weren't happy, but I had to buy airline tickets, and to Dan's credit and a lot of other guys' credit, they signed it, went, and we had a tough year. The travel was tough. We were traveling back and forth. In 04 and then 05, Dan thought he should be getting, X amount of dollars. And I said, "If you have another year, I'll gladly pay you, but you got to have another year." And to his credit, we worked it out, and he went and did his thing. He was just incredible, had a fantastic year. And really, I've never seen a guy work so hard at it, Gary. When he woke up in the morning, it was a lot like what guys do now, I think, in the NHL, and a lot of the athletes that we have in the National Lacrosse League. It was a certain way he was eating, certain workout times. He just took it on, and that's why he's been so good. He just worked at his game. Because when I first got him, he'll tell you the story. I first got him, first practice, he's running out the back door playing defense. And I said to my assistants at the time, I said, "Who's that, and why is he playing out the back door?" "Well, that's where he plays." And I said, "Well, he's not very good at it." let's get him up to the front door, and the rest was history. But he he's always saying, great things about the people around him, which is true, but he worked so hard at it. And, we had other guys, Madalena, Mike Miron had a really good year, and Peter Locke and Casey Byrnes and guys like that really, had good years.
So they ceased operations. 2008, you wind up going to Colorado for a few games under Bob, who has the head coaching job there.
Yeah.
You leave to become the head coach and GM of Edmonton.
Yes.
Now, they're in a bit of a funk. They started 0-5 that year, so you had to go in and try and reinvent that team. What would it like to try and reinvent a team? Try and give them a personality, really.
Yeah, it was really hard. Really the culture up there when I got there, and even when I left, was not great. And that's one disappointment on my end, that I couldn't turn that thing around. But it was a tough culture, and we just couldn't get out of that. I brought some of my Arizona guys in, brought some other folks I knew really well, and we just couldn't get over that hump. And eventually, the rest is history as I got fired. But it was a challenging time. Even from a business side, I know the ownership they didn't even have authorization to run the clock. They had to bring in a truck. They had to rent a truck to hook up to the clock to be able to run it. It was just a bad scene. Eventually they got things turned around, obviously, there, and Derek Keenan did a great job. But I couldn't get it turned around. Coming off all the success I had in Arizona, it was frustrating to not get that thing turned around. Yeah, absolutely.
And you wound up in Colorado again.
Yeah.
From 2010 to 14 as the head coach there. Some really good years there too.
Yeah, we did. We brought in some good people. Ed Camo and Sean Ferris joined me there. We had some success one year. We ended up losing in the first round. We hosted a game, lost to Minnesota. It was really disappointing. And it's just one of those things, Gary, where you see in the NLL, we had drafted Dylan Ward my last year. We drafted Dylan, I believe, 3rd overall. And he ended up playing in some games, but we just couldn't get over the hump in the goaltending situation in Colorado. We had a lot of talent, but we just couldn't get over the hump with the goaltending. But what a great place to coach! Just the fans are knowledgeable, they're rabid, they love their Mammoth. We saw that again this year. It was great to see them get their crowds back, because I know they've had some tough years, especially compared to the way they started off. But I had a blast in Colorado. My daughter still lives there.
Oh, wow.
So it was a special time, and loved every minute of it. And I got to work with my good friends, Ed Camo and Sean Ferris, who I love dearly. They're just great people, and it was fun to work with them.
Right, sure. Now, before we get into the Panther City stuff, I just want to get into, so you served as national director for 3D Lacrosse. Can you talk a little bit about 3D Lacrosse and the program and what it's all about? Because I think it's a really, really great thing.
Yeah, no, it was started by Jamie Monroe out of Denver, Colorado. What it is a club, for-profit club. They're in business to make money, but at the same time, it's really developed in the States down here, Gary, scholarships for young men and getting to schools that maybe they couldn't get into otherwise without lacrosse. So I started the first year. Luckily, after I got let go by the Mammoth, Jamie Monroe came calling and said, "Hey, we're looking for a director of box lacrosse," because they use box lacrosse in their training. They believe in the small-sided skill set. And so the first year, that's what I did. I went around the country supporting the directors and with box lacrosse. And so I would go in and I would run an NLL, set practice for kids, give them the feel of how to catch the ball in space and catch the ball in tight, and using the pick and roll game, the 2-man game, all the buzzwords with box lacrosse. And then after a year, they were going to open a market in Atlanta, Georgia, and they asked me if I'd like to run it. And my wife and I at the time were empty nesters, obviously still am. So we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I ran that for 5 years, and it was really rewarding. I sold parents and families on why they should be with 3D during the week, and then I got to coach on the weekends. And when I left there, Gary, well, when I first started, we didn't have any teams. And when I left, we had, I believe, 14 teams. So it was very rewarding. But it got to a point for me, all of this was happening. I loved the National Lacrosse League. That's where my heart was. I wanted to get back in at some level. It all, in the fifth year, I was really getting tired. I was, selling all week, business operations all week, and then I was on the field Saturday for 8 hours, Sunday for 8 hours. I wasn't getting any younger, Gary. So, fortunately for me, Fort Worth, Texas came calling, and Greg Bibb offered me the GM's role. And but I love my time in Atlanta, Georgia. What a great city, great sports town. Lacrosse is really growing there. The Swarm are doing a good job there. 3D is doing a good job there, and they're putting kids. Gary, when I was there, I had a Hopkins commit, a High Point commit, Richmond commit, Drexel. Some really great places for kids. I keep in touch with them.
Right.
I got an Air Force commit that I keep in touch with.
Nice.
So rewarding. Those kids, like Air Force, like kids got a career for the rest of his life, got to play lacrosse too. Really rewarding, and still hear from him. I ended up coaching high school as well there at South Forsyth for 3 years. And that program had never made the playoffs. We made the playoffs 2 out of 3 years that I was there. It was really, really rewarding to see those kids compete at the highest level in Georgia. So a lot of fun over there. A lot of fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Tireless. So Panther City.
Yes.
And in 2020, and they become a team.
Yes.
Now, Mike Pinball Clements, who's the general manager and was a player here for the Argos, he's now the general manager, who's a vice president for the Argos at one point. Now, he's always said that I don't want to be the smartest man in the room, so I want to hire the smartest people to be around me to make me look like I'm the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, with your coaching group, you've done that. You hired Tracy Koleski, first off, as your head coach, and, well, he won Coach of the Year this year, so obviously you saw something that we all knew already. Dan Teat, who I've had a lot of experience with, being part of the Brampton organization, and, of course, his patience of developing youth and being able to really get the most out of them, and, of course, Speedy Stevie Toll.
Yeah.
So, and it paid off. It paid off in dividends. You were able to put together in my eyes, a really decent team that had a mixture of veterans and youth, and really were able to mold the two of them together. Chad Cummings is your captain. Jeremy Thompson, that goes without saying. Hosek, Phil Caputo, who really was able to spread his wings for the first time, I think, in the league, because he's always been in different roles that didn't really suit him, I think. Nick Moody in goal. Yeah. And then having the youth of guys like Patrick Dodds. I think two of your best moves was getting Cam Milligan and Dean Farrell midseason, because I think as soon as that happened, also your winning streak happened. And I think that had a lot to do with it, because Cam is a great player. He's a great guy too, and his dad Jim, I know him quite well too. So they're really, really good lacrosse IQ'd people that you have around, and it's only going to get better, I think, because you have Jonathan Donville coming on, and well, if anybody didn't see the Maryland stuff, or watching him in Premier Lacrosse, it's pretty amazing what's about to happen too.
Yeah, well, you're bang on, Gary. The first steps for me was finding a head coach, and I did my due diligence. Fortunately for me, I knew a little bit about Tracy as a player. I coached him with Team Canada, and Coach Dan, of course, in Albany, and Coach Steve Toll in Team Canada as well. So I knew all those guys. But first off was the head coach, and there was a lot of great candidates. Really, what I didn't know about Tracy is he spent a lot of time in the defensive door, because we all know Tracy as a player is one of the best offensive guys to ever play, and one of the warriors. Just a guy that really battled his way through a great career. So over the interview process, I got to know Tracy, and as soon as he started talking about the defensive side of things and what he wanted to do, that's really kind of along with the culture, creating a culture, really won him over in my eyes. And he was clear-cut guy that I wanted. And, and then it was, talking to him about assistants and players and what have you. We spent a lot of time on it, Gary.
Mm-hmm.
I have a director of player personnel, Jordan Cornfield, who runs the minors out in Edmonton,
mm-hmm.
who I know watches a ton of tape. Ken Watson, our scout in Ontario, Kyle Goundry, our scout in the West, and we had John Grant Jr. down here. We met pretty much from November of 2020 right through to the day we picked. We met twice a week on Zoom calls. Put a lot of work in. We had some fisticuffs over Zoom. We worked tirelessly, and it's like anything else, Gary. Good timing, a little bit of luck. We had a guy identified in Calgary for the longest time. That's who we were going to take. And when the list came out, when you were able to talk to the players, we just kept hammering away. And a week left, and we watched this Dodds kid. I think one of us, it might have been Dan Teed or somebody brought up his name, and I've been watching film. I said, I've been watching that kid. He just cuts the middle, big, strong, great stick. And we changed our point of view because in expansion, as you've seen in expansion years, trying to find offense, Gary, was always difficult for expansion teams. So we thought, well, let's take a flyer on this kid. Well, then he goes out and leads us in scoring. But a lot of credit to Tracy. I've really got to know him. He's a great family man. He is he's become a really good friend. He and I talk every day. He's always trying to get better as a coach. The culture he created there, Gary, is I'm so proud of. I'm just so proud of because he is the man. He just phenomenal. Right. I think Dan Feet learned a ton this year. I think Steve Toll learned a ton this year. I know I did, all from Tracy, and he is deserved Coach of the Year. He did a hell of a job.
Right, and you came within an eyelash of making the playoffs in your first year, which is incredible for an expansion team. So I think the future is really, really bright for what you're building there. So,
well, I appreciate that. We think so too. And you mentioned Milligan and Farrell. We were really struggling on our power play. I finally said to Tracy, "We got to do something. Our power play just stunk." And we always knew about Millie. And he said, "Well, there's Millie." And I said, "Can you run a power play?" "Yes, he can run a power play." Then let's get him in here. And sure enough, we had Farrell in camp. He was our last cut. I said, "Well, kid can score." Sure enough, bring him in, and the rest again is history. They both did a great job, and they complimented all the guys that you talked about before. Will Malcolm, guy, he's like the Josh Sanderson I mentioned in Albany. He's just blossoming. He's starting to come into his own. Same with Dodds, Caputo. They're just coming into their own, and we're very fortunate to have them on Panther City for sure.
Well, I want to thank you, Bob. That was one of the quickest hours I've had talking lacrosse because it's terrific. Your career has been amazing, and I think it's just really starting to take off because the GM thing here in Panther City, I think the sky is the limit out there. So I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.
I really appreciate you, Gary, for having me on. Eduardo, thanks for having me on. It's been it's always great to talk lacrosse, and keep up the good work, guys. I wish lacrosse could keep moving forward towards the elite level that it deserves. And thanks to you guys for bringing it to the forefront. I really appreciate it.
So we want to thank Bob Hamley of Panther City Lacrosse. I think we want to have you again, Bob, because it's great stories and great insight into the game from all perspectives.
Well, thank you.
So I just want to thank as well Gary for hosting this show in the absence of our great leader, Mr. Frank Stanisci, the Candid man. And reminding everybody that this show can also be heard across the Spanglish World Radio Network and its affiliates on social media. Remember to go to our website, spanglishworld.ca, for all the news and programming. Remember that you can also read the great stories from our columnists and our hosts of the shows in La Portada Canada and Spanglish World and spanglishworld.ca. And I want to remind you that the NLL talk, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, but especially live it, because the NLL is sport and sport is the NLL. Until the next time when we meet again next Thursday at 4 p.m., this has been Eduardo Harari on behalf of Candid Frank Stanisci and Mr. Gary Groob, and thanking again Mr. Bob Hamley of Panther City Lacrosse. Until then, we'll see you and farewell.